Horns up and welcome to Heavy Conversations. I'm your host Demonstealer, and today I thought we would talk about how to form a band. It's one of the questions I get asked very often by young musicians. How do I form a band? Where do I start? And this is a very interesting question, and I thought I would share my personal experience over the last 25 years on how I formed my various projects, and maybe that will offer some insight to young musicians who are looking to sort of form a band. And before I start, I would like to say I think there are two sort of categories that I would put this into. One is where friends get together. You have friends who you've either grown up with or you've met in college, and you've bonded over music and other things in life, and you decide to collectively form a band with a sort of vision on making music, and that's one kind of band, I think. And the other is a little more like what I kind of did. It's a single person who has a vision for music that they want to make, and then they are looking out for people to sort of join them in that journey. So those are the two different kinds of bands. I'm sure there are many more as well. I'm sure you guys will have ideas for categorization of bands, but for me these are the two sort of bases on which bands are formed, and there are obviously pros and cons to each of them. So a little bit about my journey. As I've told you guys before, I got into metal during my schooling years. My friends in school were like, here, listen to metal, and I was like, yes, this is awesome. And all of us collectively kind of decided to learn an instrument after we finished school. So I learned guitar. I was also learning drums. I think about 4 or 5 friends were learning guitar, and 2 or 3 of us were learning drums as well. And I did form a band with one of those friends, Sunil. We called it Slaves of Pain, as I mentioned in one of the earlier episodes. And that was a very short-lived project, because Sunil and I obviously didn't share the same vision. Sunil enjoyed this, it was a hobby, it was a fun thing to do, and I wanted to do more. I had gotten so deep into metal. I was listening to, Cradle of Filth, Dimmu Borgir, Emperor, lots of black metal from Norway, and death metal like Vader, Deicide, Cannibal Corpse, and I wanted to form an extreme metal band. And I had named myself Demonstealer, and I'd even picked out a name for my band. I was like Demonic Resurrection. I was like, I love that dark imagery of demons and wizards and orcs and all that, and I want my band to like have that really evil and dark sound, and Demonic Resurrection was the perfect name. So Sunil and I moved separate ways, and in fact for 2 years I was unable to find band members. I actually used to go to college, and every second person I would meet, I would say, yeah, I'm a musician, I'm looking for a drummer if anyone knows, because I wanted to cover like Judas Priest and Death's. I think at that time Death's Sound of Perseverance was out, and Richard Christie's drumming, that intro to Scavenger of Human Sorrow, just my mind was like blown, and I was like, I want a drummer who can play this, which was totally unrealistic, because at that point in India, I think there was, at least in Bombay, there was one drummer who played double bass that we knew of, or maybe 2. So yeah, it was a bit unrealistic, but for 2 whole years almost, I just used to be known as the guy in college who walked around asking people if they knew drummers. And I had met 1 or 2, but neither of them were interested in playing death metal. So I was getting pretty frustrated. At this point, I was already learning drums myself. I had learned to program what I thought were decent drum parts and things like that. So I was writing and recording my songs already. I must have had at least like 30 songs or something like that written and recorded. And I mean, they were not great demos, but they were demos nonetheless. And I was ready to start playing live. And in fact, I spoke to my drum teacher and I said, look, let's organize a show. I am going to bring my computer. And remember, this is before laptops were a thing. I had a desktop computer. I had an onboard sound card. I'm talking about one of those EP pins. I was like, let me take my computer on the stage. I'll take an output from the sound guy, and I'll play Fruity Loops. I think I had advanced to Fruity Loops by that time. And I was like, I'll press play on Fruity Loops and I'll play along and I'll do the show. Luckily for me, I ran into an old school friend, Prashant Shah, who was studying in Purdue in America, and he had gone to Musicians Institute for 3 months and was playing guitar. And he had an amazing ESP guitar and he was ripping it up on the fretboard. Now, Prashant and I weren't actually friends in school. Like, we knew each other because he was one class ahead of me, but I don't even remember how. I think it was through a common friend that we got reintroduced, and oh, he plays guitar and I need like band members. So I asked Prashant if he would play and he said yes. And Prashant had a batchmate, Aditya Mehta, who also played guitar, and Aditya had somehow found a drummer in his lane where he stayed because he heard drum beats coming from some house. So he found Yash. Yash at that time was a Dandiya drummer. Dandiya is a Gujarati folk music, and they have a festival and people dance. This is for all my non-Indian friends who are listening. So Yash played that kind of music. He got introduced to metal through Aditya and Prashant, and then he started like playing Slayer and stuff, but he had no double bass pedal. And I think I had bought a double bass pedal which he was going to use, or maybe that came later. But basically, Prashant got Aditya and Aditya got Yash, and that's kind of how the first iteration was formed of Demonic Resurrection. At this point, I had a friend in my accounts tuition who was a pop musician, but he played keyboard. So I asked him if he would play for the first show, and that is how the first lineup of Demonic Resurrection was born. We had no bass player, so it was 2 guitars, me doing just vocals, drums and keyboards. And after that, it became easier to sort of, well, I won't say easier, but at least there was a band. The band had played a show, so I think people took it a little more seriously. So the first year, like almost every show, there was a edited version of the lineup, and we found a bass player again through common friends. And that's the thing, right? A large part of finding band members, being in the band, is a very social thing. Like, if you're not social, if you're like really introverted and you have trouble talking to people, it is hard to sort of be introduced or to find band members, because it is a very social activity. Even when you do form the band, it is like a relationship, to be very honest. You have to work at it. You have to make compromises based on each other's personalities and what you're doing, and I was very bad at that in the initial days. So we did go through a lot of different lineup changes, but the thing is, that was always my vision for Demonic Resurrection. And at least when I was younger, I was a little more of a, not so, I was not, what's the right word, I was a bit of a hole, so to speak. So I was not a very mature person, and I definitely wish I had been a little more mature about things. But I mean, at 16 and 17 years old, when you're a angry metal kid, I guess you are who you are. With age and time comes wisdom, I guess. So that's kind of how I formed Demonic Resurrection, and once that ball was rolling, it was much easier over the years to find band members. Of course, the flip side to this is, at some point the band becomes an opportunity. So for most people now, if you know that, okay, Demonic Resurrection is looking for a drummer, we are looking for a drummer, by the way, and a bass player. Most people who would audition will look at it as, hey, that is a pretty well-known band. It would be a good opportunity for me to join them and build up my profile. As compared to if you are a new band where you meet people and you form a friendship, and it's like we're both on this journey together. It's a lot, I feel, a lot better, in the sense that you will definitely be able to have stability in the band lineup, because when it's just one person's vision, you're always going to have instability in the lineup, unless you are a regular touring band making money, where you are able to compensate the musicians fairly for their time and effort. And when you're a band like ours, you really can't. Basically, whoever joins is playing for free, and the whatever the good thing is you're not going to lose money in the band. You won't have to invest your own money, you know, but it is going to cost you time, and in return for your time you hopefully get to travel, tour, you get to play shows, you know, build connections, and you further your career eventually from here. So that's one of the things that I think is a bit of a sort of downside when you have that kind of a band setup. And I also have had other bands, obviously. So one of my projects, Reptilian Death, which started out as a spoof death metal band, just a solo project that I had online, that was formed because one year, I think it was 2001, Demonic Resurrection was unable to go and perform at a festival in Bangalore called Strawberry Fields. At that time, I was like gutted. I was like, I want to go and play at this festival come hell or high water. Like, I was like, man, this is it. I want to go. I don't care how. So I said, you know what? I'll form a new band. I'll write some songs and I'll form a band and I'll go. That's how much I wanted to play a gig. Again, I was very lucky that in my college there was a guitar player called Javeer who I knew could play guitar. Now, he was not into death metal and stuff. I mean, he likes all kinds of metal, but he was mostly a shred guitar player in the sense that he loved Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Megadeth. Like, that was his vibe, you know, more guitar solos and that Dream Theater. So playing death metal was not really his scene, but he got on board with the idea. He's like, cool, you know, I'll play your songs and we'll go to Bangalore, we'll have a good time. And obviously, because we were all in college, we had time and yada yada yada. You know, there was no like, oh, I need a sessions fee or anything like that. It was just, you know, I'll come and do it for the experience. But I still needed a bass player. So at that point, I think I was teaching guitar to new players for pocket money, because, you know, you got to pay for things like recording gear and all that. So Hussein, who was also from my accounts tuition, was my guitar student. I think some of you who have been following DR, maybe you don't know this. So he was my guitar student, and I was like, okay, look, I've got a bass from somewhere. Can you play bass? And he was not a good guitar player at that point. He had just started. I was like, you just need to play the root note on the bass. It's much easier than guitar. I'm very sorry to all the bass players. In those days, metal bass was hardly given any importance. It was mostly just follow the guitar and play root notes. So I got Hussein on board. I said, I'll do drums and vocals, I can manage it. And that's how I formed Reptilian Death. And that band also went through many iterations. We found a vocalist at some point. We went through multiple guitar players. And again, it comes down to that fact that it was my vision. And everybody else was like, okay, cool, we don't mind being a part of this journey. But when other things in their life that have higher priority are there, they're going to obviously focus on that. So at some point or the other, eventually Reptilian Death also dissolved, and I revived it much later. Again, I found Ashwin Shriyan, who later joined Demonic Resurrection. And again, by the time I was reforming Reptilian Death, you have to understand this is at least 8 or 9 years into Demonic Resurrection's career. So I have become somewhat known in the metal scene. Like, people know that, okay, Sahil is very hardworking and he puts a lot of effort in his music, and whether they like the music or not, that's one thing that very few people would disagree with, that I worked hard and I put a lot of effort and I organized shows and I did a whole bunch of things. So at that point, getting younger musicians interested in playing with one of my projects was not very difficult. And I was lucky to find Ashwin Shriyan, who recorded for the Reptilian Death album. And Nishit from Albatross and Pratik from Gutslit joined later as live guitar players because I wrote the album. And Vinay joined because we had often talked about us doing something, and Reptilian Death kind of felt like the perfect project to bring Vinay on board as a vocalist. And of course, that band also, once life got in the way, Vinay didn't have time to commit because he works a job. Ashwin and Nishit both play in Bollywood and things like that, so they had to also could not give the time that the band needed. And Pratik also moved to America to study music, so that band also kind of crashed. My other project was Workshop. I think I met Riju, the bass player, while I was recording his band. So I'm also a producer, used to be at least. I used to record bands in my studio. and I met Riju with his band Old Monks. And I'm not exactly sure how I met Hamza, who was the drummer of Workshop, but we met through Furtados, and I think I judged his band at some college gig and stuff. And I was actually going to do an ESP guitar workshop because ESP guitars was just launched in India by Furtados, and I was responsible for kind of bringing them. And I was going to do a workshop, and I was like, look, if I'm doing a guitar workshop, I need to have slightly different songs. I don't want to do like extreme metal only, because I want all kinds of guitar players to come for the workshop and not be like, oh my god, what is this noise he's playing. And I really wanted to showcase the guitars. So I asked Riju if he would play bass, and I asked Hamza to play drums, and they were my backing band for this workshop. And I think we did a second and a third workshop, and after that Hamza just kept pestering me to form a proper band with him. Again, I have no idea why, but he kept pestering me, and I was like, look, we'll do it. Riju, Hamza and me, we formed Workshop. And again, so it was through my job at Furtados and being social and kind of doing things in the scene that got me connected to all these people who I would otherwise have never met. Even I think if I had just kind of been one of those people who sits at home and just writes and uploads music, and not really going out and talking to people and stuff like that, it would have never happened. My other project, Hellwind, also was, I guess by this point, it's largely I've been part of the scene. So Riju from Workshop called me and said, I'm forming a band with Akshay Deodhar and so, and we're going to do like heavy metal, classic metal, and will you play drums? Because I also play drums, and I really wanted more bands in which I could play drums. So I said yeah, and I did join that band for a while, but after some time I just couldn't manage all the projects, so I quit that band. Then a couple of years earlier, I joined an American-based project called Solus Ex Inferis. This was largely because I am very active on social media. I am in a lot of metal groups. So I think it was in one of the groups that Dave, the main man, had posted looking for a vocalist for this project, and I just like, yeah, you know what, I'll give it a go. And I recorded something and sent it to him, and he said, you're in. And I was like, okay, great, cool, let's do this. So that's how I joined that project. And of course, of late I've been avoiding joining any projects because I don't have the time. But now for the younger kids, how do you form a band? So here's what I tell most kids. If you're looking, first of all, for musicians, the best place to do that is to go for gigs and meet people there. Talk to them, make friends. I guess, like I said, this is a very social thing, how to form a band. You got to meet people, you got to talk to them, you got to get to know them. And then, if they play some instrument, you can meet them and jam with them. The other thing is figure out who is teaching music in your city. Contact a drum teacher and say, hey, I'm looking for a drummer. Do you have any students who are playing this kind of music? Because every drum teacher knows what their students listen to. So they can recommend a student and say, you know what, or give me your number, I'll pass it on to my student. Back in the day, we had a website called GigPad where you could actually post like a classified saying, hey, I'm looking for a drummer for my band, or I'm looking for a guitar player. Or you could post saying, I'm a guitar player looking for my band, looking for a band to join, or something like that. And in fact, that's how I actually met my wife. She was a singer and she was looking for a band to join. And since DR had female vocals at the time, and I always had band members quitting, I added her saying, hey, look, just in case our singer quits, like, let's be connected, and so I have like a backup in place. So yeah, I don't know if there are apps today or there are websites where musicians can actually post listings like this. I know there are Facebook groups for like selling equipment, like used musical instruments and stuff like that. So I presume there would be one for sort of instruments as well. Like, I guess if you're looking for a vocalist, you go to the extreme metal vocalist group and you post a a thing they're saying looking for a vocalist. Similarly, there's a Metal Drummers United, Metal Drummers Worldwide, Sick Drummers has a group. So join all these Facebook groups and post over there if you're looking for someone. And I think today you don't even have to be restricted by city or by country, because you can make music so easily across the internet. Of course, I'm not going to lie, the feeling of having band members in the vicinity that can that you can all meet and you can jam, and that's the thing, right? Like, so it's very interesting. Like I said, one sort of band is where you are friends, and the benefit of that is you generally have a closer bond most of the time. Like, if I'm being honest, most of the members of DR who have joined weren't necessarily on the same musical page as me. Like, I think a good example is Nolan and Rohit from Cryptos. Both of them have like a love for heavy metal and a particular style of metal, and they bond on that. Nolan, if I'm wrong, please correct me. But and they have like a really strong bond, I think, because of that. Like, if you're a fan of, like, say, Slipknot and System of a Down and Korn, and you join a death metal band, I'm not saying you can't do the job and play the songs and all that, but there's always going to be something a little more special when you both connect on the same bands. Like, okay, a good example is Viru. So Viru did like death metal, but he was not like a huge death metal head. He loved a lot of Sikh and like that kind of stuff, Periphery and Slipknot and all that. And when he joined DR, that's when he actually started exploring more of Behemoth and Dimmu, because we were like, here, take this. And of course, he did like that music, and he is a fan of like that music as well. But it wasn't the first thing. It wasn't like, that was not the thing that got us together. It's not like you meet him and like, hey Viru, what's up? Oh, you like that new Behemoth song? It's like, no, you need to listen to this new Behemoth song now, because we need you to like blast a bit more like this. So those things are also, like, I feel important. Of course, there is also, like I said, pros and cons to everything. So with Viru not being as much into death metal, he brought a sort of new influence into the band's sound. He played certain parts in a way that we would have not probably thought of, because we would still think of it in a different way. So there is an upside to everything, and I think that is kind of important to also figure out. But yeah, so as I was saying, yeah, go to shows, meet people, post online on Facebook groups, use websites and apps for listing. And I think the most important thing is to sit down and kind of bond with your band members and make sure you are all on the same page, because I think that's the thing that breaks up bands the fastest, is when people are not on the same page. And of course, if you are similar to me, if you have a vision and you're gonna make it happen no matter which band member comes or goes from the lineup, then more power to you. It is definitely not easy, but it is definitely doable as well. And if you're in a band, I'd love to hear how you formed your band. Hearing from you guys is also really important, like sharing your story in the comments. Maybe there are ways of forming bands that I never thought about. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's more or less it. I did want to talk about how most of my band members are friends because of the band. Like, we are friends today because we were in the same band for so many years. And I didn't know them before the band. So a band is also a great way to make new friends. When you bond over a shared vision, or you've spent so much time together touring, you kind of make friends for life. Of course, not all band relationships end happily. A lot of band members quit angrily, or they don't end on good terms, which is never fun. But I think if you can sort of work with honesty, integrity, and just be upfront about things, I think that is the most important, is always be upfront with your band members, whether it's about the financial dealings of the band, whether it's about the rights of the music, whether about crediting, who gets credited on the album, what is the royalty split going to be, all that stuff. Like, they are things that you should definitely talk about. So I think that covers my journey, how I formed my bands. I'd love to, like I said, read your comments below wherever you're watching this. And let me know if you have any topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes. I'm gonna try and make this podcast regular and have a new episode for you every week. And if you've enjoyed this, make sure you share it, like it, subscribe, follow me on Spotify, wherever else you're listening. And till the next episode, cheers and stay metal.